A new report has dropped showing what we've all suspected during Bitcoin's 6 months drawdown. The institutions who hold about $70 trillion of assets are quietly going all in on Bitcoin, and this dip has not scared them. Larry Fink opened the floodgates in 2023, but 2026 looks like the year that real money is about to hit Bitcoin. Let's watch this clip that was just on CNBC with, I forget her name, Mackenzie Tsoukalos, I believe. Tsoukalos, sorry. Mackenzie Tsoukalos, great reporter. And it really just shows how the institutional phase of... Whoa.
Institutional crypto adoption may continue picking up despite the lull in markets. That's according to a survey from EY Parthenon and Coinbase released today across 351 institutional decision makers. I caught up with EY Parthenon Managing Director Prashant Kher about some of the results. So this report on institutional investors and their approach to digital assets was conducted in January, and institutions made it clear that they were focused on being disciplined during this period of volatility in digital assets. So what does a disciplined approach look like for these institutions? What asset classes are they picking?
That's a great question, Mackenzie, and appreciate you having me on today. So what we're seeing is institutions were really excited about digital assets and being focused in their investment approach in 2025. As I move into 2026, it's very clear that they are interested in getting exposure to spot cryptocurrency. Now, the way they're looking to get exposure is through ETFs or exchange-traded products or regulated vehicles, which are very familiar to the institutional investor. And they're very, as they look towards 2026, a big area of focus that they really highlighted was their approach towards risk and overall governance of the asset class.
Now, the survey found that firms allocating more than 5% of assets under management to digital assets will grow to 29% by the end of this year. And my question to you is, what will have the greatest impact on leading that adoption? Is it regulation, or is it some other factor that's really driving that adoption?
The biggest factors behind driving more allocations towards digital assets is regulatory clarity. It's regulatory clarity, specifically when asked around what areas, it was around market structure and around tax treatment. So as investors see more focus and clarity in those areas, that's going to be a signal towards allocating more.
So we keep hearing this, guys. We keep hearing the idea that Bitcoin needs regulatory clarity. Now, it is becoming very clear, at least from this clip, and I'll get into the survey. I have the survey for you guys, and I'll highlight a few portions. But it's very clear that maybe from an individual perspective, from you and I, just as an average spot Bitcoin holder, that might not necessarily have much effect on us or how we view Bitcoin or whether we're going to allocate more to Bitcoin. But we are seeing that from an institutional perspective, from the big hedge funds, from the big banks, asset managers, this is what they've been waiting on. And when you really look into this report, it is becoming very obvious that even though we've been talking about institutions are here, again, 2023 was when Larry Fink launched the BlackRock IBIT ETF. 2025, we were all hearing some rumbling, some rumors that there was institutions buying Bitcoin. But I kept mentioning one thing, that essentially last year at the midway point of the year is when institutions were actually allowed to allocate capital into Bitcoin, and they don't move as quickly as, say, you and I as an individual. And when you read this report, one of the big takeaways that I got from it was that 2025 seems to be the year that they were essentially evaluating Bitcoin. They were really doing their research, putting in the time to understand the value of Bitcoin, how they can actually get into Bitcoin, how much they should actually allocate to Bitcoin. And now, from this report, from this survey, which I'm going to cover right now, it seems like we've definitely crossed the Rubicon, where it's no longer just, oh, yeah, we might put 1%. It's really becoming, hey, we're going to significantly allocate into this industry, into this asset class. And going further, the talks we've been hearing from, quote, tokenization, I think is going to become all the rage, whether I love it or not. That's totally what these institutions want to do, tokenize all the things. So That's the big takeaway here. And let me break down this survey a little bit. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to kind of pick and choose a little bit of the charts in it. But here is on EY Parthenon, which is essentially, I don't know if you can call it a think tank per se, but it's kind of a think tank. It arms people with the insights, with the tools, so that they can be quote unquote better leaders. At least that's what their website is saying. So they're talking to the hedge funds. They're probably doing a little bit of headhunting in the sense of, hey, we're going to give you guys the insights, the tools, so that when you do go to these institutions, you understand the landscape. But here is the survey.
Lost connection.
Are we good? I think we're good.
Okay.
Guys, hit me a 1 in the chat if we're good. I think we're good. It looks like I'm still good.
All right.
Anyways, the survey is, or rather on the website, it's Institutional Investors Digital Asset Survey. And here are the highlights. The survey reveals that institutional interest in digital assets is accelerating as markets mature and confidence in long-term adoption grows, which is the kind of the big idea. No longer is Bitcoin just this nascent, small asset industry. It's no longer something that you can ignore. It's something that you have to take very seriously, which is I've been saying for, I don't know, a better part of a year here, that this is the trend that we're seeing. Then, of course, regulatory progress and regulated vehicles are unlocking broader participation, bringing digital assets further into the financial mainstream, which is what I've been saying as well. We are crossing the Rubicon into mainstream adoption, for better or worse. This is where we are. Hasn't fully happened yet. Yes, we've been hearing some very big names say we're going into Bitcoin, you know, whether it's the BlackRocks, the JP Morgans of the world launching Bitcoin products, Morgan Stanley, et cetera. Literally all of the big institutions in the US and around the world, sovereign wealth funds, nation states, they are all essentially building the foundation and launching products. Again, I wouldn't recommend most of these Wall Street products, but you can see that their interest is increasing. They do want a corner of the pie, a little piece of the pie here. And now it seems like, since we are getting a little bit more clarity, quote unquote, from the regulations, that they do feel a lot more comfortable investing into Bitcoin. And actually, I was having an interesting conversation this morning with Luke, our boy Luke Mikic, and he was like, you know, it's very interesting, the announcement we got from the CFTC and the SEC about how they're going to regulate Bitcoin or digital assets. And maybe they know that the Clarity Act isn't coming. And we're going to talk about that a little later on the show. And maybe this is their kind of stab at the, quote, clarity here for the digital asset industry, market regulations, et cetera. As you can see, the institutions have been sitting on their hands right now. They're still a little unsure of whether they should go in force into Bitcoin, but they have to take it seriously. And I'm guessing the conversations are, look, we can't ignore this thing that much longer. We've been ignoring it forever. There's a lot of people that want it. Our customers are asking us for it. Like, why are we, as a customer, they're like, why are we missing out on all the gains when you keep telling me I shouldn't invest in this, but it's actually performing better than everything else? Like, you're not doing your fiduciary responsibility, guy, my asset manager. You need to figure out ways so that I can get the gains as well. And then the last little highlight is attention is shifting from access to application, with greater focus on infrastructure, tokenization, and practical use cases. Now, I think that is some corporate speak here. Essentially, they're no longer just talking about, hey, maybe we should get into this. They're talking about, how do we actualize this? How do we actually make these products? How do we actually safely get into this industry without blowing our reputations up, without wrecking our customers? So again, they move very slowly. We are on, speedboats here. We can do freaking, laps around the Titanic, but they take a long time to make their moves. You could argue that institutions move slightly faster than governments, which isn't that fast at all. But this is what we're seeing. This is what the surveys are showing us. This is the general trend that I'm seeing from the headlines, is they're going through the paces. They're trying to figure this out. Now, here is the actual survey. Again, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I will highlight one portion, which was the kind of big soundbite from that clip on CNBC, which is that firms that have already, or institutions, actually, let me go back here a little bit so I can show you who these institutional investors were that were surveyed. And this happened again mid to late January, so it is about a month or so old, you could say, but I'm guessing that not much has changed. But again, during mid to late January, polling more than 350 institutional investors globally, including asset managers, asset owners, family offices, private banks, hedge funds, and VC firms on their plans and sentiment towards digital assets. So it's obviously not an all-encompassing survey, but it is hitting a broad spectrum of the institutional capital. And that's where we got that $70 trillion number from. If you look at what you consider, quote, institutions, they manage about $70 trillion. That does encompass a little more than this survey was highlighting and who they were talking to, but it's a lot of money. Okay, there's a lot of money sitting on the sidelines looking at Bitcoin and getting ready to invest in Bitcoin, up their allocations from literally 0 to as high as 29%. I don't think you can fully understand how big of a portfolio allotment of 30% is for an institution. That's a significant portion of someone's portfolio. So here is the main chart. And it goes, the proportion of firms allocating more than 5% of assets under management to digital assets is expected to rise from 18% to 29% by the end of 2026. That is a huge increase. And again, if we are just taking this number of $70 trillion, obviously it's not saying the entirety of that capital is going to invest 30% of their portfolio, 30% of that $70 trillion into Bitcoin. But just as a thought experiment, if that were the case, that's about $20 trillion that would flow into Bitcoin. That's basically saying that potentially the amount of capital going into Bitcoin in the end of this year is about the size of the whole entire gold market cap. Now, that is obviously the overestimation here. Even if we go on the low side, about 1% of that 70 trillion, that's $700 billion. That's about half of the Bitcoin market cap. So if you go anywhere between 1 to 5 to 10%, we're talking multiples of the entire Bitcoin market cap potentially entering into Bitcoin by the end of this year.
And I'll add into this, and this is just another angle. We were talking about this earlier on in the week, right? If you just add up Stretch and Metaplanet and what they're doing, the amount of Bitcoin they're buying daily essentially is more than the amount of Bitcoin that is being actively mined on a weekly basis. And then you connect this with what Opti's talking about. Opti's become a somewhat of a macro expert here at Simply. It's inevitable that there is an incoming supply shock. And I'll give you guys a little bit of inside baseball. Of course, I can't name the bank and I can't name the individual, but one of the biggest banks, conservative wealth management banks in the United States, a good friend of mine works there. He sent me a text message. It was like, I believe it was like a week ago or so. And he's telling me, he's like, Nico, we are seriously looking into the asset. And not only that, we are actually launching products based on Bitcoin. And what does that tell you? That tells you that Wall Street has an appetite for this. And I don't think the absolute scarcity component of Bitcoin has hit reality as of yet. I think people are asleep. I think the market has not woken up to that reality because unlike gold, right? And I'm a big fan of physical gold, by the way. I love physical gold. I love the way it feels. I've gifted a piece of a bar of gold to Opti at one point because he was crushing it, but he doesn't have it
I wear gold on my neck.
He doesn't have it anymore.
I lost it.
We don't have anything. But you know, it like unlike gold, if the price of gold goes up, the amount of gold production goes along up with it because the economics of it makes sense. The interesting thing about Bitcoin, I'm going to keep reiterating this statement, is it doesn't matter how much the price of Bitcoin goes up. The amount of Bitcoin that could be actively mined on a daily basis stays the same. And not only does it stay the same, it gets cut in half every 4 years. So if you kind of weave all of this, let's put all of this back together, right? You have these the institutional kind of sentiment around Bitcoin, the amount of Bitcoin that just strategy is buying by themselves, the amount of Bitcoin that Orange and Metaplanet and these Bitcoin treasury companies, like especially the top 5 or whatever, they're gobbling up more of the supply than is being mined. Eventually, the sellers are going to get exhausted. And eventually, and I believe a lot of this has to do with the early OGs. It has to do with like the people that were getting into Bitcoin sub $100, sub $1,000. They had their, crazy return, life-changing returns. It's changed their lives, and they're taking a little bit off the table. It's not to say they're selling it all, but let's say you got into Bitcoin in 2015, 2013. Dude, you've been at this for more than a decade, and Opti and I have been at this at roughly a decade.
And I'm tired, boss.
I'm tired. It's exhausting. The Bitcoin roller coaster and the volatility in this industry at the speed of which this industry, goes, it's exhausting. Like the regulatory uncertainty. Now it's getting into the political conversation, right? Like it's a lot. It's exhausting. Listen, whoever tells you that hodling is easy is lying to you. Hodling is emotionally and spiritually exhausting. It really, really is. And it doesn't get easier over time. It stays, I would say, consistently hard. I think you get to a point where essentially you reach a level of zen where you just have accepted the volatility, and you look at your net worth and it might be down 40 to 50%. But you've just experienced it so many times that you just kind of, like the soldier with the 1,000-yard stare, right? Where he's just seen so much things in war.
It's all quiet on the Western Front.
He's just used to it, right? I should have pulled up that picture. I should have had that picture ready. He's just used to it. So eventually you just get used to you get used to hodling. You get used to these quiet periods in Bitcoin where there's really not a lot of action. Right. But that's not to say, again, that the opportunity is gone. I think we're still in the early innings. Guys, you can call me out in the chat. I'm starting to feel bullish again. I'm starting to feel bullish again, because with this bear market year that we're currently enduring, and we might go lower, you never know. I love the fact that the uncertainty in the market is creeping back in. Like, I love that people are starting to become somewhat disillusioned with Bitcoin. The fact that gold outperformed Bitcoin last year. I think all of those things were a good thing, because it really clears out the tourists, and the only people that remain are the true believers, right? But this cycle is different in the sense that this cycle is really the first cycle where you have institutional interest in Bitcoin. And remember, the supply shock, the absolute scarcity realization has not happened yet. The moment people realize that, even with all the supposed, not confirmed, but the supposed rehypothecation, not even that is going to keep the price down, because eventually, listen, they can rehypothecate it to such an extent that it will get to a point where if you just start adding up all the Bitcoin, you're like, wait a second. If you add all this up, there's 42 million. This doesn't make sense, right? And what's that going to cause? It's going to cause a massive, withdrawal of all the exchanges,
bank run,
because people are they're not going to have confidence. They're like, there can't be 42 million Bitcoin, right? So even with the rehypothecation worries, even with the paper Bitcoin worries, you still have this crazy situation where all the stars and planets are aligning to cause a massive supply shock, and that will cause Bitcoin to go to new highs, right? And again, this is not in the early days of Simply Bitcoin. It was just me and Opti like theorizing this type of stuff, and there were so many times where we had like imposter syndrome because we were like, dude, like we just like created this YouTube channel, like we don't really have like a professional media background, we're not financial journalists. But after a while we started to realize that we were right more often than we were wrong. And you know what we came to realize is like, look, like ultimately Bitcoin is a paradigm shift in terms of not only investment opportunity, but what the geopolitical implications are going to be for more and more of the world getting on a Bitcoin standard. Like, this is a monetary black hole. This is fundamentally going to change how human beings interact with each other, how the global economy interacts. And I think it's just the early innings of this. Nothing stops this train, as Lynn Alden says. I know she's talking about money printing, but again, the money printing is going to lead to what? Number go up, infinity divided by 21 million. And again, Satoshi knew this from the beginning, which is why in the Genesis block, since the very beginning, since the early days of Bitcoin, he literally put it in there. He literally said, chance are on the brink of the second bailout for banks. He fundamentally knew that governments were just going to continue to print more money, right? And eventually, guys, again, it's maths. It's not rocket science. Eventually, number goes up. So take advantage of this unique opportunity that we're close. No, we are literally at the 2021 highs right now, where you're getting Bitcoin at roughly a 45 to 40% discount. Take advantage to buy the dip. It could go lower, but this is already, I think, from a risk-adjusted return, already a great opportunity to get in, and you know, accumulate some cheap sats. That would be my piece of advice for you. Of course, not financial advice, but you know, the more sovereign advice, I would say. I could say it like that.
Yeah. The SEC announced, don't take trading advice from Telegram groups or YouTube videos. So
I mean, we're not.
I know I'm trolling. I'm trolling. But let me let's look at this chart a little more, guys, because I think there is something to take away from this, which really leans into the idea that even though we've seen a lot of headlines and fanfare coming from the institutions, it's really been a very small portion of the quote, you know, institutions that are getting into Bitcoin. It's been very big names. The very big names did lead the charge. But again, they haven't really been allocating that much capital yet. And I think from just like a normal layman perspective, just from an average person's perspective, the numbers we have heard of capital coming into Bitcoin, it sounds like huge numbers to us. It's, you know, hundreds of millions, couple billion plus, you know, Saylor bought 50 billion or $40 billion of Bitcoin. It's like, those are big numbers for average people. But from an institutional perspective, from someone that potentially has, you know, I don't know, $10 trillion plus of assets under management, $700 billion, $500 billion, it's really not that much capital in the grand scheme of things. Now, this chart does show us a couple interesting things. Let me zoom in here a little bit. You can see, here's a little note, and it goes, respondents who are not currently invested in digital assets note that they plan to allocate either, you know, less than 1%, which is 38% of the respondents, or 1 to 5%, which was the bulk of the respondents at 47%. And some of them are saying 6 to 10% at, you know, 9% of the respondents. But that's just like the broad overall view here. Essentially, what I take away from this little one screenshot here, which is backed up by the rest of the report, is essentially we are seeing that by the end of 2026, the institutions are going to officially be off zero, which is going to be, I think, huge for what Nico's been saying. Like, you know, maybe by October we'll get, you know, the run back up. That's what it looks like. It looks like 2025 was the year where they studied Bitcoin. 2026 is the year that they start getting into Bitcoin, getting significant, maybe not for them, but they get portions of their portfolio into Bitcoin. And then from there, if the price starts going up crazy in 2027, like we're all kind of expecting, who knows, it seems like all our models are broken. You can expect this to really start to snowball, for the FOMO to kick in. But there's one thing that I do want to mention on this, especially since we are self-custody maxis here, since we always recommend don't buy these products. You do not want to add a third party in between you and your Bitcoin keys. There is something that you'd expect from institutions, but we have some data here. So here is, going back a little bit, you can see that investors' preference for registered vehicles for spot exposure is 81%. So 81% of investors who have spot or crypto exposure through ETFs and ETP over holding individual crypto assets on an exchange or wallet, which you'd kind of expect from an institution. These big institutions aren't going to be self-custodying their Bitcoin, which is, a pro and a con. Obviously, from our perspective, it's like, hey, there is side effects that maybe you are unwanted here. Obviously, that's why we highly recommend from individuals that you take it into your own custody. Do not trust the asset managers to hold your Bitcoin, even though they're doing their best. And obviously, they have fiduciary responsibilities to not wreck themselves. We've seen what's happened in Bitcoin in the past, and you just do not want to get in that position. Now, of course, 66% of these investors are basically just buying ETFs. So the bulk of institutions will be buying ETFs or the stretch Michael Saylor products. And then only 36% of those that were surveyed hold spot Bitcoin or spot crypto directly. So maybe you could say we got to pump those numbers up, but I think you'd highly expect that this is the case, that these institutional investors aren't going to be just holding cold. So like, they're not just going to have a ledger in the corner of BlackRock with all of their Bitcoin. They're obviously going to these custodying, like Coinbase Prime.
No, of course. But like, ultimately, like,
we'll work on that one, I think.
We all know Brian Armstrong just keeps it all in the ledger and in his nightstands. That's where all the Bitcoin is custodied. But no, yes, ideally, I think it's only Fidelity that custodies their Bitcoin. Block also custodies their Bitcoin too. The way this works is you want institutions not only to custody their Bitcoin, but you also want proof of reserves, right? Proof of reserves are super, super important because Bitcoin allows not a trust me bro model, which is how, I think gold essentially has been running for the longest time. It's a trust me bro type of situation. Trust me, bro, we have this amount of gold. With Bitcoin, El Salvador is really leading the charge here, leading by example. They do have, a public reserve. Anybody could see El Salvador's reserves at any time. Right. I think that should be the standard, right? Some Bitcoin companies, including one of our partners, Ledin, they have proof of reserves, right? There's Bitcoin on-ramps that, again, have proof of reserves. I think every financial institution that holds Bitcoin should be transparent and they should have proof of reserves ultimately. So anyhow, and I know that 21, which is one of the largest, Bitcoin treasury companies, I know that Jack was talking about doing proof of reserves as well, right? So anyways, guys, it's going to be a fantastic show. We're going to have Bulldog Holmes, Frank Holmes, executive chairman of Hive Digital Technology, joining us later on the show. So you guys are going to want to stay tuned. But before that, let's get to the numbers. We have tons to cover. We're going to be right back in just a bit. Today's episode is brought to you by Bitcoin Well Infinite. If you're a serious Bitcoin buyer, you've probably hit the same wall. Most platforms make you give up custody just to play by the rules. Bitcoin Well Infinite fixes that. They're North America's only publicly traded, non-custodial OTC desk listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, which means transparent operations and zero counterparty risk.
You buy Bitcoin, you take immediate control, period. For trades over $50,000, you get a dedicated executive Bitcoin advisor, competitive spread starting at 1%, and immediate delivery straight to your own wallet. No custody risk, no withdrawal fees, just institutional grade execution with full asset control. If you want to buy Bitcoin the right way, book a free consultation at bitcoinwell.com/OTC or email infinite@bitcoinwell.com.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, Stampseed. Is your Bitcoin in cold storage really secure? Are your seed phrases really secure? Stamp Seed's do-it-yourself kit has everything you'll need for you to hammer your seed words into commercial-grade titanium plates instead of just writing them down on paper. Paper is fragile. Titanium plates are strong. Your words are actually stamped into the titanium plate with this hammer and these letter stamping tools. Once the words are in, they aren't going anywhere. No risk of the plate breaking apart and pieces falling everywhere. Titanium stamp seeds will survive nearly triple the heat produced by a house fire. They're also crush-proof, waterproof, non-corrosive, and time-proof. And now you can customize your titanium seed plates. You can upload your design or logo and they will laser engrave it on the back of your seed plate, the opposite side of where the words are. Stamp your seed on Stamp Seed and use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on the stampseed.com store. I want to give a shout out to our partner, Hive Digital Technologies. Fueled by clean energy, Hive has quadrupled its global Bitcoin mining footprint and channels that same scale into high performance compute, where their AI cloud is now ranked #1 in the world for network performance. At Hive, you've got dual engines, Bitcoin and AI humming, roaring, accelerating in unison. They're lean and mean, they're green and clean, and they're rewriting the playbook on sustainable digital infrastructure. You can catch the latest buzz at Hive Digital Tech or at hivedigitaltech.com. All right, everybody, we are back. At the time of recording, the Bitcoin price is $69,880 sats per dollar, 1,431 block height, 941,453 realized monetary inflation, 0.83%. The market cap of Bitcoin currently sitting pretty at 1.4 trillion. Bitcoin versus gold market cap is 4.66%, and the percentage issued of Bitcoin is 95.25% and decline from all-time high. If you're buying Bitcoin right now, you're getting it at a 44.6% discount, which sounds pretty good. Anyways, today's news story, ladies and gentlemen, latest update on the Clarity Act. It's become a little bit controversial, to say the least. I'm saying it nicely, but I am a huge fan of Senator Lummis, so I'm going to give you guys two sides of the story, and I'll let you guys decide where it stands. So first of all, the Clarity Act, right? There was two pieces of legislation that were part of the Trump administration. The Genius Act, which again was a piece of legislation more so for stable coins. And then the Clarity Act, which applied more to the Bitcoin/crypto industry. Now, the biggest thing about the Clarity Act right now is the thing that's stopping it is that the big banks essentially don't want these stable coins or any of these exchanges to pay yield or interest or dividends, in terms of if people are holding USDC on Coinbase or any of these exchanges, the big banks don't want the exchanges to pay interest for that, because again, most banks, whether it's one of the big banks, they don't really pay interest on your deposits. Like, it's laughable if they do pay interest, right? So they don't want that competition. They don't want people taking out deposits out of the bank. They see it as a threat. So again, they're kind of playing this political game. So anyways, here's the latest update on the Clarity Act. Again, I think it's above 50% in terms of the probability of it passing. Senator Lummis says clear rules, clear regulations, clear jurisdiction. That's what Clarity is about. It's time to get digital asset market structure across the finish line. And here is one of the latest clips from Senator Lummis, where she is talking about the latest on the Clarity Act.
Arduous, a patience-building process, but we're going to mark it up in April. We're going to mark it up after the Easter recess. We've accomplished so much since Labor Day by being patient, by working with the different stakeholders and the people who have to vote on this. So I just want to assure you, we really are going to get it out of the Banking Committee in April, and then we'll begin to match it up with the product that came out of the Ag Committee, which is the commodities portion of the bill. We're also going to have to deal with an ethics issue that the banking committee does not have jurisdiction over, and it has to do with elected officials' involvement with digital assets. But once we put those pieces together, I think we'll be able to get some time on the floor. Thankfully, Senator Thune has been very generous with giving us enough lead time, enough rope to try to corral all of the different parties and get a good bill on the floor that will have bipartisan support that we can get more than 60 votes on. What a amazing experience.
So first of all, shout out to the Bitcoin senator. She's done such a fantastic job. Now, the risk I would say on all this is to get those 60 votes, there is going to be some type of compromises. And the question on everybody's minds is, what are those compromises? Is it better right now in the current status quo than, you know, what they're proposing with the Clarity Act? You know, where is it going to position Bitcoiners? Is it really going to help Bitcoiners? Because ultimately, unfortunately, what's happening is that Bitcoin and crypto are getting, you know, basically bunched into one with the Clarity Act, you know, and it is what it is. You know, that's the way kind of DC works in terms of legislation. And, you know, people don't really see the differences between the Bitcoin industry and the crypto industry. So let's take a look at Lola Leitz, that's done an incredible job kind of doing a deep dive into the Clarity Act as it stands now. And let's take a look at it, right? Because the question that I want to ask you guys is it better just to keep the status quo? Or do we have to force this piece of legislation over the finish line, which actually could be harmful for our industry down the line, right? That's the big question, right? Because I think that's what a lot of us were caught by surprise. You know, we had Trump elected. You know, we had an executive order that established a strategic Bitcoin reserve. We got Ross Ulbricht freed, you know, all of these fantastic things. And we all were over the moon. We're like, guys, we won. But when it came to the legislative process, executive orders are fragile, because as soon as the next president gets elected, they can reverse all of those executive orders. If you really want something enshrined into law, it has to go through the legislative process. And going through the House is relatively easy because you just need a majority. But going through the Senate, that's where you need a filibuster-proof vote, which means you need at least 60 votes for that piece of legislation to go through, which means you need something that is bipartisan, right? And the reason I'm bringing that up is, unfortunately, it is what it is. Right now, there's two political parties, and one political party in particular is not necessarily completely pro crypto and pro Bitcoin, right? Again, it's not monolithic, right? The Genius Act did get across the line. Senator Lummis is saying that, you know, she's very confident that in April, the Clarity Act is going to get across the line. But what were the compromises? What were the compromises that were made to get senators from the other side of the aisle to go along and vote for the bill? That's the big question. So no more delay. Let's jump straight into the Lola Leitz post. So this is by The Rage. I believe that's her outlet, right? Numerous accounts are amplifying talks from the Digital Chambers DC Blockchain Summit. That's the clip that I just played for you guys, in which Congress people promised to get the Clarity Act across the line between end of the week and end of the year. While largely sold as a positive to the industry, the latest market structure draft has proven to toe a dangerous line that could enable increased surveillance and the effective criminalization of privacy. With stablecoin yield, as what I've been telling you guys, with stablecoin yield as the #1 point of discussion, the cryptocurrency industry will likely have to make concessions in its protections of DeFi for Clarity to have a chance of passing the Democrats, who continue to view illicit finance a red line. By the way, I think that's a distraction. To be honest with you, I think they just want a CBDC. I mean, Elizabeth Warren has said as such, and she's the head of the Senate Banking Committee for the Democrats. Several standalone bills have since been introduced in Congress to protect developers, such as the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act and the Promoting Innovation and Blockchain Development Act, which offers safer pathways to safeguard development. So, I mean, this is where we stand. You know, I think that this bill got co-opted First, there was a lot of pressure from the banking industry. Also, it sucks because why couldn't you just pass a standalone bill that says, protect the right to self-custody on the federal level? The way that, the current legislative process works is they're grouping all of these things into one ginormous bill. Right. I mean, even Trump's bill, like his bill for the presidency was called the big, beautiful bill. That's how DC works right now. Right. You don't pass just one bill at a time. You put all of these things together. And as a Bitcoiner, it's quite frustrating because, I love what stable coins have done, like what Tether has done for the global South and allowing the global South to essentially get access to US dollars. Right. Has been a game changer for people's lives. And then eventually I think that's going to lead to Bitcoin, right? So I'm a fan of what stablecoins have done for the world. Not so much of a fan of DeFi. But the point I'm trying to make is this is a DeFi bill, a crypto bill, a stablecoin bill, and a Bitcoin bill all put into one. And you have to make concessions on certain things where if it was just a protect the right to self-custody bill, I don't think you would have had to make concessions. But anyways, so that's how it currently stands with the Clarity Act. Personally, I'm at this point where, because it's taken so long, because they've dragged their feet the way they've had, I'm feeling like I don't know if this will cause more harm than good. Is where I'm currently at. Again, I'm not a political expert. I do read a lot about politics and, the Clarity Act and a lot of these things, but I have this bad feeling. About it. But at the same time, I'm a little bit divided because I do trust Senator Lummis. Like I do trust her, right? Like I know she's a Bitcoiner, right? So anyway, and I know, and she's a professional. This is what she does. Right. So anyways, we'll see what the outcome is. We'll be covering this in April and we'll be on top of it. Obviously, the Trump administration is really putting their they're really putting support behind this. Scott Bessent has gone out publicly and put his support behind the Clarity Act. The way that the Trump administration is approaching it is they're basically saying, listen, if we don't do this, other countries will, which is a good thing. But again, all goes back to the same question. Is this bill going to cause more harm than good? I'll leave it in your guys' hands. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Opti, real quick before we move on to the next segment.
Yeah, I wish we covered the official Lola Leeds tweet from her personal account, and she's like, don't pass the Clarity Act, which, look, I have the same gut feeling that Nico does. At this point, from everything I've heard, I have two things that's kind of going along in my mind. One, I think this might not be so good for us as Bitcoiners. It might be good for the quote unquote crypto industry at large. And then two, shout out to Senator Lummis. She has, put up a fight. She's done the good fight. She's totally a Bitcoiner. She not only is a Bitcoiner, but she has very prominent Bitcoiners in her family. Like she is a Bitcoiner. She's doing the best she can. This is no knock.
She's doing the best she can with the card she's been dealt.
100%.
Her staffers are amazing. The Senator Lummis team, they've been fantastic. So
100%. I'm not so hopeful on her timeline. That's just kind of where I'm at. I hope it does, and I hope it's beneficial.
Absolutely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, after the break, we got Frank Holmes joining us, Executive Chairman of Hive Digital Technologies. We're super excited to have him on the show. We're going to talk about so many things. I'm looking forward to it. You guys loved it when he came on the show last time. So anyways, we're going to be right back after the break. I want to give a shout out to our partner, Ledn, the leader in Bitcoin-backed loans. Ledn lets you unlock the liquidity in your Bitcoin without ever having to sell it. Since 2018, they've issued over $10 billion in loans to more than 10,000 customers worldwide. I love these guys, and not only do I have an account with them, I also have a loan. And here's what really sets them apart. There are no monthly payments, and you can pay back the loan at any time. Once you send your Bitcoin as collateral, you can have cash in your account within 24 hours. Ledn has over 1,000 five-star customer reviews, and they've never lost a single dollar or single sat of customer funds. So if you want to tap into the wealth of your Bitcoin without having to sell it, head over to learn.ledn.io/simply today, and you'll get 0.25% off your first loan. I want to give a shout out to our partner, sat123.com. Sovereignty isn't just about your money. It's about your communications too. When the grid goes down, most people go dark. Cell towers fail in hurricanes, cyber attacks, and blackouts. But satellite phones, they don't rely on local infrastructure. Iridium has 77 satellites in orbit, giving you a direct line anywhere in the US, even offshore. If you hold your own Bitcoin keys, you should hold your own comms too. Sat123.com also has everything you need to start building your Bitcoin citadel. Starlink, battery backups, Faraday bags to protect your hardware wallets, and much, much more. It's a one-stop shop for anyone serious about resilience and off-grid independence. Stay connected, stay independent, stay sovereign. Go to sat123.com/simply today and use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on the store. I want to give a shout out to our partner, BitKey. If you already self-custody your Bitcoin, you know the deal with hardware wallets by now. Complex setups, clumsy interfaces, and a seed phrase that can be lost, stolen, or forgotten. BitKey fixes that. BitKey is a multi-sig hardware wallet built by the team behind Square and Cash App. It packs a cryptographic recovery system and built-in inheritance feature into an intuitive, easy-to-use wallet with no seed phrase to sweat over. It's simple, secure, self-custody without the stress. Time named BitKey one of the best inventions of 2024. Get 20% off at bitkey.world. That's BITKEY.world with the code SIMPLY. All right, everybody, we are back. Before we continue the show, ladies and gentlemen, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor, the BitKey, ladies and gentlemen. This is literally one of the easiest hardware wallets to use on the market. Literally all you got to do is you put your finger on the fingerprint reader, you tap it with your phone, and bam, bing, bam, boom, you're ready to send your Bitcoin. And you download the BitKey app on your phone. It's incredibly easy to use. Ladies and gentlemen, before Frank Holmes joins us, I'm going to go back and forth with Opti. Opti, let's go back to the Clarity Act conversation. So do you want to pull up that post by Lola Leeds?
Okay.
Is it appropriate?
Yeah, no, it's appropriate. Give me a second, guys. Let me find this tweet.
So yeah, because it is very important. Specifically, and again, we know most of our audience is based in the US, but from a legislative process, you guys have to think about it from this angle, right? Anything that gets passed in the US, other countries will follow from a legislative process. Like, why am I saying this? Because of the kind of the game theory aspect of all this, right? So like fundamentally, like if the United States becomes super pro Bitcoin, and you have a lot of entrepreneurs essentially leaving, Europe and leaving Asia to come to the United States to set up, Bitcoin businesses here, which is the reason the Trump administration is putting so much weight behind passing this bill. That's essentially, why they want to do it, right? Of course, the Bitcoiners naturally so are hesitant about it, which is, why they're saying, don't pass Clarity, tell your friends. I can't say that. I can't say that myself. I'll leave it to the experts, of course, like Senator Lummis. Anyways, we have the one, the only, the legendary executive chairman of Hive Digital Technologies, Frank Holmes, joining us today. How you doing, Frank?
I'm great. Look at my blue hat on to go with my blue blazer. So I've got my swag on like you have. I may not be good looking, but I'm looking good.
Frank Holmes in the house. So Frank, great to see you. I heard you guys were just at a fantastic conference in California. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because I was chatting with you and Aiden, and it seemed like it was very, very exciting.
I think that Jensen's taken the level of education and entertainment to another level, besides the innovation, the technology, because a lot of times Silicon Valley will have an innovation, but they really don't embrace everyone. So it's really well thought out. And I think he's taken the page from Warren Buffett. Now, I've been to Buffett's event, and it was just very, very similar. You take over a hockey arena, and you would have Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett up on stage, and the board would be in the front row. Bill Gates would be there, and everyone would be taking notes. And you would see all these young kids with their computers typing away, listening to what Warren Buffett was saying, and Charlie Munger. Then you would walk through a tunnel into a huge convention room, and they sold you ice cream because he owns Dairy Queen. And then they had Geico Insurance to sell you insurance. And then they had a huge jewelry stand they owned because he didn't believe in gold as owning gold. He believed in selling gold jewelry. So he owned a gold jewelry. And it's so funny because the big story was that Bill Gates bought his engagement ring for his wife from this jeweler. That was in a multi-carat special, rah, rah, rah. And now you go to Jensen, and Jensen Hung basically has Sharks Hockey Arena taken over, and the whole floor is for investment people and media people. So you would have the right to go on the floor close, or if you were an analyst, you would be up front, and a few other diplomats. And Michael Dell would be in the front row, the VIP location they had. But most of it was really unique that all the buyers, all the subscribers, all the data centers, anyone that are users of the GPU chips, they would fill up all the other stands right up to the nosebleed seats were sold out.
That's crazy. And I can't even.
And it used to be 20,000, then it's 25,000, it's 35. It's 50,000 people come, but only 25,000, I think, or 18,000 get into the arena, maybe walking around trying to see if they could find a seat. But it was a great experience. He's a master of cadence, of storytelling. And he said it all started with gaming.
Yeah, it's true. It's true, right? With the graphics card. Yeah.
And so did the Bitcoin ecosystem. It was gamers. I know this really, really well from Ethereum. The Ethereum network had 30 million kids around the world running up the electrical bill of their parents while they went to sleep, and they were using their NVIDIA chips to see if they could mine 1 Ethereum coin a year. And if they were able to get 2 out, they got a new computer.
No, I mean, it's the amount of GPU demand, for, the LLMs is, it's continuing to scale at a what I call a hockey stick type of level, right? It's just going like this, right? It's going literally parabolic. Now, Frank, I do also want to talk about Paraguay. Some very exciting news that you were sending me over the weekend over WhatsApp. What's going over down in Paraguay?
Well, I got to come back to the storytelling. So for you at the conference, we had the privilege of being with all of the senior people from NVIDIA. And that was just, it's just thank you to see these thought leaders and the distribution. So the person that's in charge of all of Latin America, he's in Sao Paulo, having breakfast with him, and basically the commander of Canada. And what NVIDIA has done is that they've created a vertical, it's called. And the vertical is sovereignty, sovereign data centers. So the data centers in Canada, the government policies are very caught up with having Canadian data centers for Canadians. The same thing is happening in Sweden. The same thing is happening in many other countries, and same thing with Paraguay. So it does sort of fit in that we had to go see who's in charge of all the distribution and support in Latin America. Then we had to go and meet the new vertical person in charge for sovereign data centers. And so you have many government senior ministers that were showing up to this conference because they want to know how they're going to be positioned in this run to use AI to improve security, national security. That one thing these government ministers don't do is come out and say how they're going to be able to get rid of a lot of fat in their organizations and streamline regulations. I would love to see that. I think that Elon Musk did that in America, and the backlash was huge. but it basically showed a lot of wasted money. And I really believe that you could do that with all the securities laws. You could upload and run them through for any redundancies or conflict and streamline things. And that's what AI is doing. And what's happening in Paraguay is that they've come out, and it's really important that the ambassador who's in Washington, D.C., has been a big catalyst for this, for President Pena, is to create something to compete with Texas, to compete in America. And so what they've come out with is a 15-year stable electrical contract at something like 4 cents a kilowatt. So you have this stability for 15 years of hydroelectricity is extremely attractive to a hyperscaler. And it's very, very attractive to us. And we're the biggest player there. So we've come up with the invention of a creation of a tier 1 new design that's going to allow you to go to tier 3 to build what they want to call, which is really important to NVIDIA, AI factory.
Wow.
Really important, Nico, because they explained to me, and it was a young guy from Italian Swiss that was explaining that data centers used to report to the CFO, and it was an expense line item. And all CFOs are trying to cut costs, streamline, cut costs. But now, when you have the concept of AI factory, it's reported to the CEO of the bank or the company or the country, and it is about generating economic output. So the paradigm shift has really been well articulated. They're calling it the AI factory, and who's building in Abilene, Texas is an AI gigafactory. And so where will these gigafactories go? So in the journey of Paraguay, is you realize that Paraguay doesn't have a lot of the infrastructure that's necessary at this stage, but they will develop it. And one of the things like dark fiber and what fiber do they have? So we're testing this, and we're partnered with Tigo to take some of our chips and to have a professor at Columbia University, where President Pena's alma mater is. And so that person is doing research on large language models. And we wanted to try to figure out what is the latency, 5,000 miles. That's roughly the distance between Asuncion and New York City, Columbia University. And it'll take a month of every day looking at the data, what they're going to be doing. So it's very exciting beta test, because before you start to go and scale a tier 3 gigafactory or AI factory, you want to make sure that you're going to be able to sell those electrons and the capacity to use those GPU chips to professors in America.
Incredible. Would you call this, Frank, the first AI cluster in Paraguay? And you guys have a central role in it.
Look at my team says that's what it is, and I'm going to go with my team.
That's what it is.
I am not a data scientist or I'm just a quiet fund manager that's built a reputation on alternative asset classes from gold to Bitcoin.
You're a very humble man, Frank. So I could say it. Hive is playing a instrumental role in rolling out the first AI cluster in Paraguay.
That's true.
Boom. Awesome. Frank, also very exciting news. When I read this, I was like, Hive and robotics, what's going on? Breaking news from from the headlines and the press releases that you guys were releasing over the last couple of weeks. Hive and AMC Robotics partner to advance AI robotics infrastructure. So you guys are not only powering AI for education in New York City, but also robotics. Could you tell me a little bit more about that as well?
Clearly, robotics is going to be, and making these humanoids is where Elon Musk talks about his great vision, that he'll sell more humanoids than he will sell Tesla vehicles. And so with an aging population, these humanoids are going to be so important for taking care of people. And so it'll become, if you have the economics, you're going to get a humanoid to help around the house. And we've had them when you think of the robotics of cleaning the carpeting. Do you have one of those machines that go around, bang, 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 bang?
The Roombas.
So we have one at our house, and I think something scares the dogs and does everything, but it does pick up a lot of dust unless you force people to take off their shoes when they walk in the house. So the concept of robotic vacuum cleaners, they've been around for a bit. I know that this is not brand new, but take it to another level of a humanoid that can balance and pick you up if you're sick. They can literally so strong in their balancing factor. This is coming, and that concept. So the company that partner with is Met in Hong Kong, and so that's and they are using about $1 million a month in these GPU chips. They have to go rent them for what they're doing. And what their original business was dogs, like pet dogs, but the dogs are security dogs. And they have additional sensors. They have sound sensors, light sensors, and cameras all over them. And they move around as a security lot. They will move internally. We're seeing now in the Miami airport, you've seen them, the robotic wheelchairs.
Yep.
Right? The robotic wheelchairs. And you see in Austin, delivering food all over are not guys on bicycles are going to knock you over. They're going along on the road, on the sidewalk, is beep, 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 is a robotic Uber delivery service. So autonomous vehicles, autonomous world needs these data centers. They need access to these GPUs. Besides their own simpler GPUs that are inside of them, they really need the advanced ones to navigate through from an autonomous sensor machine. And it's really important they have so many sensors on them. Nico, they have, like I said, sensors for sound, but sensors for various types of light, functioning at day and night. And then they have the ability to respond to you and information, and how strong is the batteries. So this is going to become a big boom, having security like this. And so we think it's it has the potential for us for $1 million a month using our servers. And so we're at 35 million, pushing to go to 100 million here. This is just another add-on that we have. We'll get that final agreement signed, but it's really important that we want to know what end user and autonomous vehicles. I would love to have a Wago. I mean, that would be a phenomenal to build the data centers for them. And I know that they're in San Jose and they're in San Francisco, but they won't take you to the airport. They have a very closed area in Austin, Miami, and San Antonio. It's not the autonomous data collection is not there. They go up and down every little road to take information day and night, and it'll take time, the data building. But all that data building, all of that is really they need our HPC AI factories. That's what they need. So we want to know early, come and use Buzz. Hive's Buzz. It's buzzing.
I absolutely. So Frank, I've to be seeing this roll out is fascinating, because it's you guys were essentially uniquely positioned, starting from the Bitcoin mining space, building out all of this infrastructure to really catch this new wave of this, I would say, HPC demand.
What surprised me is that Irish Energy, they have some revenue, but as a percentage of Bitcoin revenue, it's very small. And I think that this year we'll outpace them in scaling our HPC AI revenue versus, if you look at the ratio with Bitcoin mining, even though we're going to expand our footprint by 10 exahash in Paraguay, I think there's other exciting parts is this HPC and sovereign data center.
Yeah, absolutely. We have Frank. We have a special guest from Hive. Also, seems like he's on the show. Do you want to bring him up? His name is Darcy.
Great. Because you were talking earlier, Nico, regarding the conference that was taking place in DC, and I was listening to it. So I immediately asked Holly, see if we could get Darcy to come on and to talk about questions you have regarding, he just came back fresh from DC, and he can answer any questions you may have and thoughts that you were discussing.
I love this. All right, this has become a forum. I'm
There we
into
go.
it. Okay, so Darcy, obviously as Bitcoiners, we have a bit of a concern regarding the Clarity Act. What's in the Clarity Act? A lot of things got bunched in together. Of course, we're big fans of Senator Lummis. Love her staffers. Interviewed Senator Lummis a couple times. She's fantastic. So I have full faith in her and her ability. And of course, this is her career. This is what she does. What do you know? What is the latest on the Clarity Act? Do any parts of the bill concern you at all? Do any parts of the bill, should any parts of the bill concern the industry as a whole?
No, Nico, I don't think so. There was a lot of talk in DC over the last couple of days, and it was around the Clarity Act. Everyone's happy. The Genius Act is there. It's given us some framework, and clarity was the topic between that and energy for data centers. And they had people that were talking they had Republicans, they had Democrats. Everybody seemed to be talking about how important it was to make sure that we get the Clarity Act done. However, they also acknowledged there's a couple speed bumps that need to be dealt with. The one that continues to come up is the rewards, or whatever you want to call it, coming out of the stable coins. That seems to be a bit of a stumbling block that they know that they can get through. It's just going to take some time. And they were also mentioning this isn't the only stumbling block. There's other things, as we know, within the U.S. process when they put these things through. There's always the other things that aren't really part of the core that you don't hear about. But everybody seems ready to push it forward. I think it's great for the industry, and once they can get this done, I think it's just going to help overall, what we're trying to do in the United States, making it a center for cryptocurrency, a center for blockchain, and the discussions that took place and the involvement that they had from the different senators on both sides of the aisle coming in and talking openly to the community about what's going on. It was an incredible conference. Frank and I went last year, and we divided and conquered. Frank was in on the West Coast at GTC, and I flew across from west to east to get down there, and it was well worth it. There were great conversations that took place, and it's just a great community. And having it there in DC, they can bring those politicians in for a couple hours, do their speeches. They get to sit around, listen to some stuff, and then they can go back to the Hill and do what they need to do.
So I completely agree with you, and this was the Trump administration's philosophy as well, right? Which is if the United States does not take a leadership role in Bitcoin and AI, another country will do it.
I can add into this, Nico. I'm a little older than you two guys, and so I have some connect the dots going back to coming in the capital markets in 1978. So in that journey, was the big push was money market funds for mutual funds, and mutual funds were predominantly equity. And when all of a sudden they got in the money market fund game, and they could pay you monthly yields and like annual interest rates went to 20%. Banks were not allowed to pay 20%. So mutual funds came out, and all of a sudden billions of dollars left banks and went into mutual funds, but didn't really hurt their lending, but it made them more attractive. They had to make more benefits for you, and it created real competition. And so you're seeing that the bank lobbying, and Elizabeth Warren, she's anti-crypto, so she gets support from the bank lobbying group. They do not want rewards. They do not want rewards as really form over substance as interest on the money funds. And but those money funds that grew the mutual fund then grew the whole ecosystem. There was more money to go into equity. And then to bail out the SNL, then it became a real another crisis, is they were allowed to all of a sudden pay these huge interest rates, and they were insured. So all this money that was in mutual funds and money market funds left there and went over into SNL companies because they could get 18% coupons insured. And so you're seeing this whole idea, the debate really, from my experience, is paying interest or rewards on treasury bills is extremely valuable, and the stable coins getting that privilege would all of a sudden make the crypto ecosystem explode.
Of course.
And the banks are trying to stop that because they do not want to lose depositors. That's really for me, my experience. Now, I wasn't there with Darcy, and Darcy got so much more color besides that. But I'm trying to relate to your audience. This is my mutual fund ETF experience.
Yeah, and that's one of the and I appreciate that, Frank. And that's one of the things that we've been covering for quite a while now, and we've been trying to simplify it for our audience, which is, if you open a traditional bank account, you're not getting any money, you're not getting any interest rate, or you are getting an interest rate, but it's like 0.000 something percent. Then they charge you a monthly maintenance fee if you don't have a minimum balance. And they feel threatened, right? When Coinbase is basically saying, "Hey, listen, if you leave $10,000, dollars of equivalent of USDC on Coinbase, we're going to give you a 3.5% yield or reward in Bitcoin." And of course, they see that as people are going to take money out of the banks and leave it on some of these platforms. And I would say that's a good thing. That's competition. You would want to see that in the free market.
I think that was to take place. Bitcoin goes to 250,000.
Yeah.
Why?
Oh, that's very exciting.
Equity funds. If you take a look in the 90s with the internet being unleashed, and then there was Y2K fears, planes will fall the sky, and so everyone had to elevators stuck in elevators, all this fear stuff, had a huge technology boom with the internet being unleashed. And where did a lot of that equity growth funds come from? Money market funds. So what do you think what happens if all of a sudden these stable coins become really important as a portfolio diversification? I know I have my money out the reach. I'm getting a coupon on it. It may be modest, but I'm getting some yield. Then it makes it very competitive against Tether. And that's another sense of because Tether keeps all those rewards. That's why Tether is the most profitable company in the world. When you have 500 and some odd million wallets and you have $200 billion and you keep all that interest, it's quite significant for 200 employees. And so what would that do? Well, that would wake up a lot of investors that would say, I'm not in a money market fund, I'm in a stable coin, and now I want to go into Bitcoin. And you would just see it seamlessly happen. I share this with this, it's my hypothesis, because I saw this happen with mutual funds and money market funds that all of a sudden made it seamless to switch over into equity funds. And I saw the competition. I had the highest yielding money market fund back in 91, 92. And what did Schwab all of a sudden realize? That was their game. They started offering money market fund yields that were also very high so that they wouldn't lose the money. So you would trade stocks and go not into my money market fund, but into theirs. So the idea of a money market fund or a stable coin paying rewards would be the biggest boom to all the Bitcoin fans out there.
Amazing. So this Clarity Act is instrumental for it to pass, for Bitcoin really to reach these new highs. Now, Darcy, I do have a question for you.
Okay.
How was I truly believe that it's so important that Bitcoin, for at least on a legislative level, is bipartisan, right? Because if not, you're going to have these crazy swings between, the political elections. Did you see a lot of bipartisanship at that event? Did you have senators from the other side of the aisle? Because as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, and I was talking to Senator Lummis about this, I think it was early last year. Elizabeth Warren does sit on the Senate Banking Committee for the Democrats, right? That's an influential position, to say the least. So was there bipartisanship? Did you see a lot of Democratic senators that were willing to reach across the aisle and get behind the Clarity Act so it can get across the finish line?
Yeah, I totally got that feeling from being at the conference, and a lot of them were talking about this isn't bipartisan, it should be nonpartisan.
I agree.
The party side shouldn't make a difference. And on both sides, there was support. They know that this needs to move forward. There are those people like Elizabeth Warren that, will not want it to happen. But the communication and what they were saying is, we want this to happen. It's the best for the country to be able to strengthen itself, make sure that they can keep up with what's happening in other countries. And it's something that you shouldn't be looking at the color of the pin or the color of the tie that they're wearing and which side of the aisle they're on. So it was very much that we're working together. We're going to work to get this done. There's a lot of hoops that need to be jumped through, but to make America stronger and to be the center of Bitcoin, the center for data centers, the center for blockchain, this is something that they need to pass. So I didn't hear anybody coming in and saying, this is why it shouldn't happen. There would be people on fireside chats, on panels from both sides talking, saying the right thing. And I truly felt that they weren't just putting on a show. They really did feel that it needed to happen, and they're getting a lot more educated in it. And I think that's the big thing, sort of like what Frank was talking about, is if we can get this through and that you can have stable coins that have some rewards along with it. The thing that I always talk about for the 8 years that I've been in this industry is education and becoming more mainstream. We had huge mainstream when we had the Bitcoin ETFs, the other ETFs that come out. This is taking it to another level in terms of the adoption that we're going to be able to see within the industry. And it's going to release the chains from the explosion that we're hoping to see and we feel there's going to see when America can have this Clarity Act through and really strengthen it. And to your point, that you don't want this to be swinging back and forth depending on who controls the House, who controls the White House. It just needs to be done. Everybody has to be happy with it to be able to move forward, and that everybody knows what the rules and regulations are moving forward.
Fantastic. And we got a question in the chat, by the way, and I do want to answer it. I'll be at Bitcoin Vegas 2026. Will Hive be there? Yes, Frank will be there. Simply will be at Bitcoin 2026 in Vegas. Frank,
we'll
if people...
have a Gucci B hat for you, because everyone knows that this relates to using green energy to mine Bitcoin. So we remain very, very bullish on it. But I want to share with your viewers that one of the things that has happened in the past 6 months has been China increasing its Bitcoin operations. And what the rumblings are, and an item was recently coming back from Hong Kong, that all this banging took place October the 10/10, they like to call it, on the 10th of October when Binance blew up, and derivatives and algos and highly leveraged play. But I did some other data, and you can see that on the weekend, countries like Russia, Iran, and China are 30% now of the global network hashing. So that means they're out of 450 Bitcoin a day we all compete for, they're getting 30% of those coins, and they bang them out on the weekend. So you can see mathematically down on Friday and usually bottom to get a turn on Monday, Tuesday. Why are they doing that? They're not sending missiles here. They're trying to put stress on all the people that bought Bitcoin and bought it so they can influence the elections. This is a gubernatorial year, Republicans versus Democrats, and anyone that bought Bitcoin at $100,000, they're down money now, so they can blame Trump. And it's a really interesting psychological warfare. It's financial, it hurts the wallet, but that is what's been taking place. Looking at, they want US dollars, but at the same time, China's doing things to try to stop the use of dollars. But now what's happened out of Venezuela, as you know so well, Nico, is that the oil is not Chinese yuan anymore, it's in US dollars. And the proceeds of that are going into a trust to rebuild that country. And I think in Iran and the Straits of Hormuz, the same thing is going to happen, that they want that oil because China's selling missiles to get Bitcoin, using Bitcoin also, and they're selling missiles and buying oil at a 20% discount. They're buying it from Russia at a 20% discount. Oil is the biggest dollar value commodity traded in the world on a daily basis. It still runs this world. And so you're seeing this push by Xi Jinping against the US dollar, weaponizing the BRICS, weaponizing the United Nations not to use the US dollar. And now, especially the oil trade business, which is the biggest, is now being pushed back. So this is a bit of a global scene that you're seeing, like we're witnessing, that Bitcoin really is a global phenomenon. And it does tell you that the cost of electricity is really key to where Bitcoin trades at. And as electricity becomes more scarce, Bitcoin will trade higher. So all of a sudden, government-sponsored cheap electricity coming out of Russia and out of Iran and out of China is just influencing, because they can mine it and down to the cost of $40,000. So they don't care. They just want to give all of your listeners pain. They want to give me pain. They want to give Darcy pain, because that's how they fight. And so this is the sort of war you don't realize that Bitcoin has become part of this geopolitical war.
That's wild.
Because it's so decentralized. It's a phenomenal digital wealth transfer mechanism.
Yeah. Frank, Opti had a question. We were talking before the show. Opti, you want to jump in here? It was regarding the Middle East and the situation over there.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone that's been watching, and hey, what's up, Frank? Hey, Darcy.
Hey.
We've seen last time you came on the show, Frank, you gave great macro geopolitical overview for everyone, and a lot. Yeah,
everyone was losing their minds.
Yeah, and
like, this is fantastic.
Yeah,
Bring Frank back on the show.
And a lot has changed literally in the last week. So I was wondering, what is your view on this potential oil shock? You know, the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, what we're seeing in liquid natural gas right now, like. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now in regards to oil prices and energy. And of course, you are a Bitcoin miner. Bitcoin mining, of course, turns energy into Bitcoin. And so what is your view currently? Like, what do you think is going on? And is it being overhyped or is it being underhyped currently?
Well, I would look at the bond market first. And the only concern I had this morning in our research meeting is that the 2-year, the 5-year, where the 5 years always used against dividend paying stocks. The 10-year is about any infrastructure project management. And if you go for a project loan, it's always based on a 10-year cost of capital. So when all three go above their 50-day moving average or the 10-week moving average, that means there's another stress. And the bond market is a magnitude much more than 10 times the equity market. So we are seeing that stress of interest rates rising, not falling. And I think beyond the back of that is this exercise of stopping Iran is about $1 trillion. It's going to cost $1 trillion. So that means it's going to be debt funding. That means it's going to put pressure on the dollar, and that's going to be good for Bitcoin and gold down the road. But right now, short term, we're witnessing that Iran, not only in January that they killed estimates up to 30,000 of their own citizens for protesting, which is so tragic. They don't care about their own people. These are fanatics. At the same time, they had so many missiles that they hit 15 countries at one time. I think we put a dent in by maybe 90% of them. So I think that we're going to end this thing by probably the end of March, going into April, enough to slow them down from what they were doing. But we've not seen that regime change. If you're not going to get a regime change, then I think what's the game is to say, okay, let's get control of the straits and the U.S. to protect it. And other countries now of Europe that were denouncing what America and Israel were doing are now saying, no, we'll be part of it and we'll come into the straits and we'll also help to protect the flow of oil. And China, by the way, you're going to have to pay full rate. You're not going to be sending missiles into Iran to be able to, with ghost ships that are not claimed, and buy the oil at a 20% discount and hide what's going on in the world, and the same thing happening with Russia. So I think that's probably the positive end will come out of it, but the debt loads is not going to change. And modern monetary theory by the G20 countries is not going to change, in my opinion. And so they're going to continue to print the money. And that's always the real key idea and the concept of owning Bitcoin. The scarcity of 21 million coins is because this money printing will impact it. But what does impact it short term is someone gets access to cheap electricity, then they have margins. Now, if I'm a Bitcoin miner and I was able to get 2-cent electricity, I'd have big margins today and will allow me to hold a little more Bitcoin. That's all. That's what it would do. But if I'm evil China and Russia and Iran, I just want to suppress it. So I'm basically passing on and knocking out 30% of the daily production. It all gets bundled in one of the weekends to blow it out. So I think that's what we're wrestling with, and hopefully I do think it'll get resolved here. The big score, if you're in the capital markets, will be look at jet fuel, and jet fuel has gone parabolic, and you can see when it went above the 10-day, then the 50-day, what happened to the airlines like American Airlines, which are unhedged, and United, but especially American. Those stocks go down. So you have what they, the K economy they call, where you can see these stocks. Jet fuel is up, and down comes these stocks. And as soon as that jet fuel starts to come down with peace, then you'll see the airline stocks soar, and you will see Bitcoin soar.
I love it.
Does that help give you a color of?
Absolutely.
Totally.
That was fantastic. That was great. Anyways, gentlemen, thank you guys so much for joining us. Before I close it up, Frank, we got asked this question 3 times on Rumble, by the way. Someone asked, will Hive be selling the vests at Vegas 2026? They got asked 3 times.
Darcy will figure out the cost of the shipping, and we'll make it affordable for you, because the vests are so popular when it's cool weather. Even in the summer, you need them in Sweden, and so they're very popular. But we have the hats for shareholders and viewers. So we're very happy. Our swag is clearly identifies us as being the green Bitcoin miners. That's really interesting to see how people identify with us.
Absolutely. We saw someone in the chat saying that they have 2 Hive hats in different colors. You got to get all of them in different colors.
We have we've got the Harvard color. I go to Harvard every year, and we have the khaki color. Let me see here. This is for wearing the khaki pants, and we got khaki here. And then we have over here is Darcy. I don't know what color Darcy has. You have the white one, Darcy?
The white one?
Yes. Now the women love the white one. That's the real hot commodity. If we have them on a table, the white one's gone first. They're gone. And who takes them? A guy that's late for dinner with his girlfriend, or to pick it up. So I love the fact that you're identifying Bitcoin miners sourcing green energy with the Gucci bee. And by the way, this Gucci bee, as I get teased for, it really comes from the Vatican.
Really?
The Vatican has their own beehives, and they make their own honey, because they're always worried about someone trying to poison the cardinals and the Pope.
I did not know that.
So
wow.
If you're next time in Rome, you can turn around and see the shield. You can see in Florence the Medicis, and they all have their different family names, but they do have the Hive. They do have this type of bee at the Vatican.
I love it. That is very cool. I didn't know that. That is very, very interesting. That's fascinating. I'm going to look that up after this. And there's probably a couple of YouTube videos on it. Anyways, guys, yes, Hive will be at Bitcoin 2026. Frank Holmes, of course, will be walking the floor. You guys could see him. Maybe we'll have him at the Simply Bitcoin podcast booth. We'll be doing some interviews on the floor as well. And Darcy, thank you so much. This was a surprise. I love that you came on the show. This is fantastic. And
absolutely, it's the way we pivot.
And provided clarity on the Clarity Act, which I love. That was fantastic. That was great.
Let's hope it gets passed. Let's hope it gets passed this session.
I mean, Frank said 250,000. You guys heard it. $250,000 Bitcoin potentially if the Clarity Act gets passed. I mean, I'm liking the sound of that. What do you think, Opti?
I like number go up.
Exactly.
Number go up too.
Anyways, for the thousands of people watching across YouTube, Rumble, X, Nostr, smash that like button. Go give these gentlemen a follow. Bulldog Holmes on Twitter. Go check out HiveDigitalTechnologies.com. They'll be at the Bitcoin conference. Anyways, gentlemen, thank you guys so much for joining us on Simply Bitcoin Live. We appreciate it.
Take care, y'all.
Thanks, Nico. Take care.
Guys, before we wrap up the show, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor as well. Of course, the Bitcoin conference, Simply Bitcoin, will be there. Bitcoin 2026. You guys want to get your tickets now before the prices go up. All you got to do is scan the QR code on your screen, and you can use promo code SIMPLY. Again, promo code SIMPLY to get 20% off your tickets to Bitcoin 2026 in Las Vegas, Nevada at the Venetian Hotel, April 27th through the 29th. You're not going to want to miss it. This is what I call the Bitcoin Super Bowl weekend. Of course, the Simply Bitcoin crew will be there. We hope to see you guys in Las Vegas, Nevada at Bitcoin 2026. Get your tickets now before the prices go up, and the prices will go up. I mean, I think there's a ticker that shows you when the price is about to go up. Anyways, guys, if you guys enjoyed the show, you know what to do. Smash that like button. Consider subscribing to Simply Bitcoin on YouTube, on Rumble, on X, on the audio platforms, on Nostr, wherever you guys want to consume this show. It's up to you. Anyways, we love you all. We appreciate you all. We wouldn't be here without any of you guys. So we really appreciate you guys tuning in every single day of the week. Thank you guys so much. Like I said, we wouldn't be here without you. And go enjoy the weekend. Go outside. Get some sun, touch some grass, eat some steak, enjoy the family. And of course, we'll be back on Monday for a brand new episode of Simply Bitcoin Live.
Today's episode was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.